In this tutorial we're going to learn how to create a coffee table. The first thing you would want to do is to create the coffee table top. So get the rectangle tool, click on the origin, which is the center of all axes, drag it out and type 1100 for 1100, comma 550. Then press zoom extents. Once you have that rectangle, we're going to get the push-pull tool. Click on the rectangle and drag it upwards and type in 25 and enter. Then press the space bar, and we want to make it a group straight away. So based on our previous experience with groups in an earlier tutorial, we're going to select everything using the select tool. Right click, make group, or press G on your keyboard if you have that shortcut set up. Again, if you want to create any custom shortcuts, go to Window, Preferences, Shortcuts, search for the tool, make group for example, and then assign a shortcut to that tool. So we have our coffee table top now. As you can see, it looks like an orthographic view, so maybe you might want to go to the 3D view before carrying on any further. I just find that SketchUp works best when you're in an actual perspective view. Now looking underneath of it, we're going to get the tape measure tool. So click on the tape measure, click on an edge, bring it in and type in 70 and enter. And the same from each edge, so click 70 and enter. And try to go from edges, because if you go from an endpoint and type 70 and enter, it's only going to create a marker, not a continuous guideline. So go from the edge, which is red, purple, or in a midpoint, bring it in along the surface and make sure it's on an axis along that surface, and then type in 70 and enter, and again 70 and enter. Okay, so we've set out where we want the legs to be. Next we need to create one of the legs that we want to use. So with the rectangle tool, click on an intersecting guideline point, drag it out and type in 70, 70 and enter. And this time, before we go and copy it around to the other four corners or three corners, it would be best if you make it a component. So to do that, with the select tool, double click in the center of the square, which gets the surface and its edges, right click on it and make component, and we can go and type in a name for that. Alright, and we want to ensure that replace selection with component is ticked. So we've created a component because we know that we've got more than one of the same object, and we want to be able to edit a leg if need be, and edit the other three legs that are like in the scene as well. So with the move tool, press Control once while the object's selected. Click on the endpoint there, drag it off to the side here, and click. Then again grab the select tool, then either Control or Shift, click on the other object. So we want to select both at once for copying. Again with the move tool, press Control to give it a plus next to the move tool, then click and drag that down until it intersects with the other guidelines. So we're purely using the guidelines as a reference for where to move and copy our legs. So hit spacebar again so you don't accidentally keep moving the other legs. Click in white space away from the model, and it will deselect everything that's selected. And now that we're finished with our guidelines, we can easily get rid of all of those. Go to the edit menu, delete guides, and now you're just left with your legs. Now we're going to push-pull the legs down. So with the select tool, double click on one of the legs, get the push-pull tool, click on the leg, drag it downwards and type in 350 and enter. Hit the spacebar or the select tool, click on white space and close the component. So we now have the tabletop and the coffee table legs. So next what we want to do is we want to add some railings around the coffee table. So we're going to get the rectangle tool again. Before we do that, actually, we might just set the guideline for where we want to start the rail. So I'm going to click on the midpoint of the bottom of the leg, go upwards and type in 50 and enter. Then with the rectangle tool, I'm just going to simply draw on the leg and type in 60, 20, enter. Okay, so I chose the face that I wanted to draw that rectangle on, and then just drew it on there and typed in 60, 20. Next, what we want to do is we want to get the select tool, and we want to place it onto the line, the guideline, but we also want to center it as well. And you can do this all in one motion if you want. So you could get the select tool, click on the profile that you want to move, get the move tool and put it on the midpoint of the railing. Click once only, just once, so that your finger's free. I've got nothing touching the mouse as such. Then put it on the line. Okay, so I moved the midpoint of the profile line onto the guideline. Now when you hold shift on that guideline and then slide it along the guideline, I can now reference the midpoint below and then click. So in one movement I was able to move it onto the line and center it at the same time. So that could be a little bit tricky, so you can do it a little bit more simply. So if you get the rectangle tool, click on the guideline, drag it out and then type in 60, 20 and enter. Get the select tool, click on the profile, get the move tool, then click in the midpoint, and then you can just simply only move it along one axis. So I can see that that's the green axis, so your arrows can lock you or help lock you onto axes. So if you were to press the up arrow, that locks it in the blue. The red arrow locks it in the red axis. Sorry, the right arrow locks it in the red axis, and the left arrow locks it in the green axis. So the left arrow is the one we want in this instance. Drag it downward your mouse, touch the midpoint of the leg and click. And you've now placed it on the leg. So next what we want to do is we want to copy it to the other side. So instead of trying to copy it from here, we don't know where the center of the leg is. Since we know that it's a square leg, we can copy it from the bottom left corner here with the move tool and control, drag it to the other side, touch the endpoint and click. Alternatively, you could have selected the profile, got the move tool and found the midpoint of the profile, move tool with control, left arrow to lock it along the green, then touch the midpoint below to align it to there. Now what we're going to do is learn how to do a rotate and copy. So with the rotate tool, we're going to click on the rotate tool, and we need to figure out which plane we want to use for rotating and copying this object. So it's not going to be green, because if I was to choose green it's going to go that way, which that's not right. It's not going to be red because that's just going to slide it up and down. So we actually want the blue axis, but it's a little bit hard to pick at times without the right view. So again, like earlier when we moved the profile on axis, we can use our arrows, which is really helpful. So left arrow again is the green, and that locks it in the green. Right arrow is the red, locks it in the red. Up arrow is blue, and it locks it in the blue axis. So that's the profile that we're after. We're now going to go and put it on this bottom corner here and click once, and that only sets the plane. So it's really important that that profile was selected before you set the plane. because otherwise you're not going to rotate and copy anything because nothing's selected. So I've set the plane, I choose my starting point, which is here, click, start my rotation, control, which gives me a copy just like the move tool and control, and then I rotate it around and click, and then I've rotated and copied that around the corner. So I'll do that one more time just so you can think about how you're going to try that. So pre-select what you want to rotate and copy, rotate tool, up arrow for the blue axis, click and place the plane on this corner here, drag it along this edge, click to begin, press Control while you're doing that, and then go and put it on to this other corner here and click. And now you've done a rotate and copy. While it's still selected, it's good to go to the Move tool, press Control, click on the endpoint here, and drag and copy that over to this opposite corner here. So now we have 4 profiles that we can now use for push pulling. So I'm going to get the push pull tool, and I'm going to click on the surface here. So just before I do that, earlier when we were setting up the SketchUp template, I talked about the pre-selection push-pull option. So if I go to Window Preferences, I just want to talk about this a little bit right now. If I go to Window Preferences, Drawing, we have a thing called Disable Pre-Pick on Push-Pull Tool. So I'm just going to put it back to default, which there is no tick in it, and just show you how this works. So for example, if I have this selected over here, then I get the push-pull tool. You don't realize it, but that's what's going to be push-pulled. It's going to push-pull what's selected. So for example, if I forget that I have selected that surface to push-pull, or something in the drawings selected that you don't realize, then you grab the push-pull tool, come over to here and think that you're going to push-pull this rectangle. I'm going to click. I'm not going to now try and push-pull that out, and lo and behold, it's actually not push-pulling what I wanted it to. It's push-pulling what was selected. So that's what I was talking about when setting it up. I don't want that to be an option. I want to go to Window Preferences, Drawing, and I want to disable the pre-pick on push-pull tool. So what that means is if something's selected in the model, you click on the push-pull tool, everything gets deselected, and then you get to choose what you want to push-pull. So I can just simply click on what I want to push-pull, drag it to the opposite side, and then complete my action. Okay, so I've push-pulled one of the rails. Now if I want to push-pull another rail, I can go and double-click on that, and it will automatically repeat the last measurement that I've done. So that's really helpful when you're doing multiple push-pulls. Next, I can grab the other rail, push-pull that to the opposite side, click, and then push-pull tool again, double-click, and then I can complete the railings. So at this point, I might press spacebar so I can grab the selection tool, and I want to make all these rails a group so that they're contained and not going to get caught up with anything else. So select all. If you've got the shortcut, press G. If not, right click, make group. And again, we can edit out the guides. We can delete those. So edit, delete guides, and get rid of those. Okay, so next what we're going to do is we're going to create some railings horizontally across the coffee table. So I know it's not a beautiful coffee table, but there's plenty of skills to be learnt when creating this. So if we go now and get the tape measure tool, I'm going to click on the inside edge and bring that out 20 millimeters. Go to the opposite side, drag that in, but be careful and make sure that you always get a continuous guideline. At the moment it's got a black dot, which I'm not sure what happened there. It's not quite right, so it doesn't look like I've got an edge, but no, maybe I do. So just make sure you get the edge and then type 20, enter, and just make sure when you're doing it that it says it shows like a purple dot or a blue dot showing that it's on face. Okay, so now I have two guidelines which are 20 millimeters in from each edge. Next, I want to get the rectangle tool again, and again I'm going to type draw the rectangle and type in 60, 20. That's good. Now, like before, I'm going to select the rectangle, then get the move tool and move it from the midpoint onto the guideline. Once on the guideline, hold shift and then reference the midpoint. So just go and touch the midpoint and click to finish. Now I'm going to make this one, instead of making it a group, I'm going to make it a component. So double click with the select tool in the inside surface, which gets the surface and the edges. Right click, make component, and you can give it a name, railing or rail. And then make sure replace selection with component is ticked, then click create. Get the move tool. Then we're going to look at how we can do an array and copy. So as you can see, I want to do multiple copies along this railing, but the problem is that I'm not sure exactly how many copies I want to do. So with the move tool, I'm going to press Control. I'm going to click to begin from this corner here, take it along. So we've got 60 there, but I want a 5mm gap, so I'm going to type in 65 and enter. Okay, so I've done one copy. While I'm still in the move tool, I could type in 10x on my keyboard and press enter. That's not quite enough, so we'll try 11x, enter. Ooh, but that's a little bit short as well, so it didn't quite meet my guideline. So it was quite cool to be able to do a move and copy and array, but it wasn't quite the right option for this instance. So we'll go undo. So select tool again, click on the railing, get the move tool, press Control before you start, and this time I'm going to copy it from the bottom right corner. Click to begin, take it far right until it hits the guideline, click, and this time we're going to divide rather than multiply. So just after copying, just after you click, you can type in 11 / enter, and it will automatically divide it up into 11 times. So if that spacing is no good, you could go and type 12 / enter. Oh, 12 is not good enough. 9 / enter. Too great a distance. 10 / enter. Still looks like a bit of a gap, so it looked like 11 / was the right option. So with the select tool now, I can double click on one of the railings, or if we want to test out our skills with the outliner, we could go to the outliner, type in rail here, find one of the rails, double click on it, get the push pull tool, push pull it to the other side. Be careful not to go straight through, so choose the inside edge, click, and then if you just click away in white space in the outliner, that will close the component. So the outliner again is a handy tool for filtering and finding a specific component that you may want to edit. Okay, so once after we've finished that, we can go to the edit menu, delete guides, and now what we want to do is we want to add a bit of glass into this tabletop. So we're going to get the select tool and double click on the tabletop, get the rectangle tool, and we're just going to use the legs as a starting point to draw a rectangle. So it's quite a helpful way of just figuring out where the aspect ratio of that rectangle is. Then if you were to get the offset tool, we could just click directly in the inside, bring it in, and then type in 5 and enter, just so that we're a little bit away from the legs, or while still in the offset tool you could type 10 and enter, and that would just offset it a little bit more. Then if you were to press H on your keyboard with the previous shortcut we created earlier, so again, window preferences, shortcuts, if you were to type in the filter hide rest of model, you can then assign H to hide rest of model. So it only works when you're editing a group or a component, and a component, and then when you press H you can see that it hides everything away apart from what you're editing. So now what I want to do is get the erase tool, and I'm just going to erase the exterior rectangle. So holding my mouse button down and then dragging it over 2 lines, release, then it will erase the two at once. Get the push pull tool, click on the surface here, push pull it up until it says on face, and that's quite handy. Once it says on face, click, or if you were to type in the thickness of the coffee table top, that would also erase the hole and make an opening for you. Get the select tool, and this time holding control we're going to pre-select the 4 edges that we want to select. If you accidentally select something you didn't want to, you could hold shift and then unselect that. Get the offset tool next, click on the edge and bring it out 5mm and enter. Then with the push pull tool we could go and push pull down that edge 5mm and enter as well. So we've created a bit of a recess for some glass to go into, and I just press the space bar so I don't accidentally keep push pulling things. So now we could get the select tool again, click in white space away from the group, and now we have our coffee table opening. So at this point it would be good to have a save because you've done quite a bit of work, and just remember to always save. It's really important to do that. Even if you just get the one save started, it will help assist the autosave and make sure that that works. So I'm going to go to coffee table, type in the name coffee table and save that. Okay. Next we're going to add a little piece of glass. So if we get the rectangle tool, I'm going to zoom in carefully. So I put my cursor where I want to zoom to and zoom in. Click on that point, zoom out, take it to the opposite side, click, and then zoom out. Then straight away with the select tool, double click on it to get the surface and the edges. And why I did that is because you can't make a group of just a single surface. It needs to have at least the surface and its edges. So I always just get the select tool, double click in the middle, gets the surface and the edges, right click, make group, or press G on your keyboard. With the select tool, double click on the surface, then get the push pull tool, click on the surface and bring it downwards 5mm and enter. So that's a perfect little piece of glass. It will recess perfectly into the slot that we created. Okay, so we've now technically created the coffee table, so it's almost complete. We can now look at how we can make it look a little bit better. So the first thing I would do is texturize the model. So if you click on the paint bucket, that will automatically open up the materials. From the materials we could go into glass and mirrors, and just pick one of the glass materials. So if I just choose this grey material and click on the surface, it's going to straight away paint that whole entire group. So if I look closely, you can see when I spin we get a little bit of flashing, and that means there's two surfaces that are perfectly touching one another, and so SketchUp can't decide which one to display correctly. So what we're going to do is just adjust this internal glass group. So I'm going to get the select tool, double click on it, and with the push pull tool I'm just going to bring it in with 1mm from each side. So double click, double click, which brings it in 1mm, one more side, double click, and also underneath, double click, so that it's not touching the coffee table anymore. So when I zoom in, it looks like it's, fitting in there perfectly, but there's just a bit of a gap, which is quite helpful when doing a presentation. Okay, so we've painted the glass. Next we need to paint the surface. So the surfaces. So if we go to the drop down here and go to wood coverings, or even just standard wood, we can then grab a material. So I'm going to grab this light lumber, this wood lumber, and with any group or component, you can just click on the component and it's going to place it on there. But just be aware that the texture might not be going the exact way that you want it to go. So to rotate a texture, you actually have to put it onto a surface, not a group. So if I was to get the select tool and double click on one of these components, grab the material again and click on it, you can see that it paints them all in one go anyway, which is helpful. Right click and go to texture position, right click again, rotate 90, and then you can rotate the texture to how you wanted it to be. Then if I right click one more time and then say done, it's now rotated that the direction I wanted it to go. Then to ensure that the rest of the surfaces go the same direction with the paint bucket, I can hold Alt and click on the material, which then samples that rotated texture. And I can either hold Control or Shift on the other surfaces and click, and it's going to mimic the same rotation. So now when I close the component, everything's going in the same direction. But just be aware that since they're all components, you may find that your grain is looking repetitive, so you might double click on the grain and just ensure that maybe you adjust the position so that there's no knots or anything that is too obvious. So just maybe like that. Right click, done, and that's looking better. So now I can again go to the paint bucket, hold Alt and click on the material, and then this time I could just hold Shift and paint the whole entire model. But you see the legs aren't quite right, so if I get the select tool again, double click on the legs, get the paint bucket and just at least get it onto a surface, then it will be able to be edited via right click on the surface, texture, position, rotate it if you need to by right clicking, rotate, right click, done. Then again paint bucket, hold Alt, click on the rotated texture, then Shift and paint on the other surfaces, and that will ensure that the texture positions are rotated in the right direction. Okay, so next what we're going to do is look at the shadow settings. So if we bring down the toolbar, if we click on the shadows and then adjust the time of day, you can see there's something funny about the shadows. They're not landing exactly where I thought they would. So it looks like they're just projecting underneath the coffee table top. So the problem is that when we drew that coffee table top, we drew that on the ground plane. Then we worked downwards, negative the z-axis. So the z-axis is solid, it's blue. Underneath that, it's dotted. So we're working below ground. With the select tool, drag a selection around the object. Get the move tool, click on the bottom of the leg, go upwards, press the up arrow to lock it in the blue axis, then click on the origin, and then that will bring it up so that it's on the ground and flush with the ground level plane. Get the select tool and then drag the time of day a little bit closer to noon and then maybe towards June. So you can easily just adjust the shadows as you please. So what I'm going to do is just create my first 3D view. So with the zoom extents, I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger and maybe zoom extents one more time. So here's my first 3D view. I quite like that. So to update my view, I can just simply right click and choose update, and we'll update that. Now to create another view, I'm just going to spin it around, zoom out a bit, maybe change the month and time of day. Select, right click on the 3D view and then select add again. And at any time you could go to scenes and just make sure you've named your scenes. If you can't name your scenes, you need to click on this button here, which is show details or hide details. And then we're going to go 3D view 2. We can make that 3D view 1. And if we spin it around again, we'll do one more shadow change. right click and add the scene, 3D view 3. And if we click on the 2D view and then zoom extents, you can see it's a perfectly flat 2D view. And we want to select right click update. So this one here, I want it to be my top view. So I'm going to change the name and select top view. Then I'm going to choose my next standard view, which is the front view. Zoom extents, just make sure that it fits the screen. Then, and I did that, so I started from the top view again, so I click on the top view, completely flat 2D view where the perspective is turned off. Then I go to the front view, and you can see it's completely flat still. Zoom extents just to make sure it fits the screen. Click on add scene, and then select front view. Okay, then one more view, which would be the right view. Zoom extents, add the scene, and we're going to call that right view. Okay, so we now have three 3D views with different shadows, and we've got three standard plan views. So I want my plan views to be black and white. I don't actually want them to be colored. So if I was to click on hidden line, that will then make it black and white. Then what we're going to do is we're going to right click and then select update on the top view. And you can see here there's a bit of a warning. We've changed the style of how the SketchUp model looks. So we need to decide whether we want to save it as a new style or update the selected style. If we were to choose update the selected style, it would actually update all the 3D views, which is not what we want, because the 3D views are the presentation views. We want them to be in color. So we're going to select save as new style and then select update. Now when we go to the front view, you can see that that's still in color and the right view is still in color, but the top view is correct. So what we need to do is just expand styles, select the select tab, go to the in model, and you can see here are the two styles that are associated with the model. So if I was to click on the 3D view one, you can see that that is the colored style. If I click on the top view, that is the black and white style. So if I now click on the front view, you can see that that's switched back to the colored style. So we need to click on the black and white style, right click on the front view, and then select update. Again, click on the right view, it's showing the colored style, so we want black and white. Then you need to right click and update the scene so that it's now using the black and white style. So there we are, it's now remembered those styles, and we are honky-dory. The coffee table is almost complete. So if you were to, if you wanted to, you could at this point export the images as JPGs or PNGs. So to do that, you would go to File, Export, 2D Graphic, select the location on your desktop, choose Options, untick the view size so you can increase the image resolution, maybe 3000. Make sure that you want a better quality image, so slide the slider to the right. Anti-aliasing, or anti-alias is what you are after, because you want smoother edges when you export, so you want the lines to be as crisp as possible. And then we want to select OK. Then hit Export. And then if we minimize that, you can see we've got the coffee table image. And it looks pretty good. Okay, so if we zoom in, the edges look pretty nice. You know, it's a pretty decent image at that size. So it's up to you if you want to do higher quality than that, but for now that's pretty good. And have a save, because we haven't had a save for a while. Okay, so that's one way to just export an image from SketchUp. If, for example, you wanted to export a DWG, like a 2D DWG, you could go to File, Export, 2D graphic, and just change the file types to DWG or DXF, and then you can export that. You can choose the option or the release version, so AutoCAD. You want to export it full scale, okay, and then you could export that as a 2D graphic that a CNC machine could read and machine from. Okay, so we've got that there now, and let's just assume that we maybe want to make an animation from this. So if you go to Window, then Model Info, or if you just click on the Model Info button here, we could go to Animation, and we could enable scene transitions. So we want possibly like 5 seconds between transitions, and we want no delays between each transition, or if you want, you could have a delay and it would just pause for 1 second or 2 seconds before moving on to the next scene. So we might do 2 seconds. So to get it started, we just right click on the Scene tab and select Play Animation. And it will just transition between each scene at 5 seconds between. And you can see up the top there the shadows were slightly changing as we were transitioning between the 3D views. So this animation that you create can also be exported to an MP4 file. So if you go File, Export, Animation, you could go as either an image set or a video. So an image set is just the images where you can then stitch them with a video software later, or you can go File, Export, Animation, Video, H.264 codec is probably best, and MP4, and then you just go export and it would export your animation and create you a video file. So if you're not needing to export an animation, I'd go back to Model Info and just untick Enable Scene Transitions and turn off the scene delay. So when you go to each scene, it just instantly happens. Okay, and have a save. Okay, so if we wanted to add a little bit more detail, we could go into one of the components. So if I was to go to this league here, double click on it, I could press H to bring back the rest of the model. So from this edge I could bring up a guideline which is maybe 10 millimeters. From there I could get the rectangle tool and just create a little bit of a rectangle here, which is 10 by 10, 10, 10, enter. I could then look underneath the coffee table, click with the select tool on this surface because I want to borrow its edges, then click on the follow me tool, then click on the profile, and that would create a negative detail. So it's quite interesting, it used the outline to follow along to create some negative detailing. So if I go to select again, I can go edit, delete guides. Next what I could do is I could, in SketchUp I could do notes and annotations if I wanted to. So for example, I could click on the note tool, text tool, click anywhere and just type in coffee table, click away, and that's a static note. When you click in white space it just stays still. Or you could click on a leg and bring that out, and it will actually name it the name of the component, which is quite helpful. When you spin around, it always looks at you and it names the component. So over here I've got a rail, and then click away. So it's quite cool, quite a useful feature. That's if you don't want to use layout, for example, to do your notes and stuff. And then again, once you've got those notes there, you can just go File, Export as a 2D graphic. So let's just get the eraser and just erase those notes because we're going to add some in layout anyway. And just before we go to layout, we're going to do some dimensioning as well. So with the dimension tool in layout, in SketchUp, sorry, we can click on that, choose a point to begin from, and then bring it away, and then I can do one more dimension from there to there, bring it out, and it can be a bit tricky without the right view, so it might look down on top, and you may be able to use the arrows as well. No, it doesn't look like it, so it's stuck in the blue axis, so we'll just try one more time. There we are, and then one more dimension there as well. So see how the dimensions aren't looking at me properly? We could go to model info, then go to dimensions. You could select all dimensions. Then you could always align them to screen. So align to screen. That didn't quite work. Let's try it again. Model info. Align dimensions above. Align to screen. Oh, sorry. And then I needed to select update selected dimensions. That's it. And then when I spin around, you can see that they always look at you. Otherwise, you can align above the dimension line or below or centered, and you select update selected dimensions. So you can do visual dimensions in SketchUp, but I tend to use layout for dimensioning. It's just a lot more, I guess, straightforward. Okay, so that was the end of the coffee table. The next project is project 2, and we're going to look at how we can put this coffee table into layout and present it on an A3 sheet or A4 sheet.